Have you ever found yourself having a conversation that never actually happened? Maybe you finally told someone how much they hurt you. Maybe you imagined explaining yourself perfectly. Maybe you replayed an argument over and over until every sentence sounded just right. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes the conversation ends with words the other person never said. And yet, somehow, it feels real. Most of us have done this without questioning it. We call it overthinking. We tell ourselves to stop. We assume it's a bad habit or a sign that something is wrong with us. But if that's true, why does almost everyone do it? Why does the mind return to imaginary conversations so effortlessly, even years after the moment has passed? What's even stranger is that these conversations rarely stay in the past. They drift into the future. We rehearse apologies that haven't been needed. We prepare for rejection that hasn't happened. We defend ourselves against accusations that may never come. It's as if part of the mind is living somewhere reality hasn't reached yet. The uncomfortable truth is that some of the most emotional moments of your life may exist only inside your own imagination. Not because you wanted to escape reality, but because your mind kept bringing you back there. The real mystery isn't why these conversations feel so vivid. The real mystery is why your mind keeps creating them in the first place. Imagine your mind as a room filled with empty chairs. Each chair belongs to someone important: a parent, a friend, a partner, a stranger whose words lingered longer than they should have. Even when those people are nowhere near you, the chairs remain. And every so often, your mind quietly invites one of them back for another conversation. Not because you're trapped in the past, because your mind is still searching for something it doesn't feel it has. One of the brain's remarkable abilities is that it can simulate reality without reality being present. Long before you speak, your mind can imagine the words. Long before something happens, it can rehearse possible outcome. This ability helps us prepare, solve problems, and navigate uncertainty. It's part of what makes us human. But the same ability can become emotionally persuasive. An imagined conversation doesn't have to be real to create real emotions. Your heart can race. Your stomach can tighten. You can feel relief, regret, or anger, all while sitting alone in complete silence. The brain often responds not only to what times is, but also to what it vividly anticipates. That's why these conversations can feel so difficult to let go of. They're not just thoughts drifting through your mind. They're emotional rehearsals, quietly testing different futures, searching for an ending that finally feels safe. And this doesn't only happen after painful relationships. It happens before job interviews, before difficult phone calls, before asking for forgiveness, before saying, "I love you," and sometimes before walking into an ordinary room, which raises an even deeper question. If these imagined conversations are trying to prepare us, why do they so often leave us feeling even less prepared? We usually assume these imagined conversations are about finding the perfect words, but many of the time, the words are only the surface. Underneath them is something much older. Think about a person standing at the edge of a frozen lake. They don't know if the ice will hold, so instead of taking a step, they test it again and again and again. Not because testing the ice gets them across, but because uncertainty feels more frightening than standing still. Our minds often do something similar. When we don't know how someone will respond, the brain begins running simulations. It imagines acceptance, then rejection, then another version, somewhere in between. It keeps changing the outcome, hoping that one rehearsal will finally remove the uncertainty. But uncertainty doesn't disappear simply because we've imagined it enough time. That's the contradiction. The more uncertain we feel, the more our minds rehearse. And the more we rehearse, the more emotionally real those imagined futures become. Before long, we're no longer responding to reality. We're responding to possibilities our own minds created. Perhaps you've noticed this before. You walk into a conversation already exhausted, not because anything happened, but because you've already lived it 100 times in your imagination. The other person is speaking for the first time. Your mind is hearing it for the 101st, and this reaches far beyond conversation. It's why we lose sleep before opportunities that haven't arrived. why we grieve endings that haven't happened, why we celebrate futures that may never exist. The human mind doesn't simply remember the past, it constantly rehearses possible futures. But that still leaves one question unanswered. If these rehearsals are meant to protect us from uncertainty, why do they sometimes become the very thing that keeps us trapped inside it? Perhaps the biggest surprise is this: your mind is not trying to predict the future. Not exactly. More often, it's trying to protect the version of you that might exist in that future. Imagine a smoke alarm. Its purpose isn't to tell you there's definitely a fire. It's designed to react before it's certain, because being wrong is usually less costly than reacting too late. Our minds often work in a similar way. When something feels emotionally important, a relationship, a friendship, a difficult conversation, a chance to belong, the brain doesn't wait patiently for reality to unfold. It begins simulating possibilities. Some hopeful, some frightening, many unlikely. From an evolutionary perspective, anticipating possible social outcomes could help us prepare for cooperation, conflict, rejection, or repair. But the same ability that once helped us navigate an uncertain world can sometimes become overactive, especially when the outcome matters deeply to us. And then something subtle happens. The conversation stops being about what another person might say. It becomes about what you are afraid of feeling. Rejection, embarrassment, regret, misunderstanding, loss. The imaginary dialogue is no longer between two people. It's between your present self and every future version of yourself you're trying to protect. This is the mirror moment. Maybe those endless conversations were never proof that you couldn't let go. Maybe they were proof that your mind cared enough to keep searching for a path where you wouldn't be hurt. The tragedy is that the search can become endless, because reality has an ending. Imagination doesn't. And this isn't only true for conversations. It's why we replay breakups long after they've ended. Why we rehearse careers we never pursue. Why we return to moments where we wish we'd spoken differently. Sometimes the hardest thing to leave behind isn't the past. It's the future your mind never stopped trying to rewrite. Picture someone sitting alone in their car after work. The engine is off. The parking lot is almost empty. They aren't looking at their phone. They aren't listening to music. They're talking to someone who isn't there, not out loud. Inside their mind, they replay a conversation with their manager from earlier that day. I should have said this instead. Then the scene changes. Tomorrow's conversation begins before tomorrow arrives. What if they think I'm not good enough? Another version appears. Maybe they'll apologize. Then another. Maybe I'll finally tell them how I really feel. 20 minutes pass. Nothing in the outside world has changed. But inside, they've lived through relief, embarrassment, anger, hope, disappointment, and acceptance, all without leaving the driver's seat. From the outside, it looks like someone sitting in silence. From the inside, it's an entire emotional world unfolding. This is why imaginary conversations can feel so exhausting. Your body doesn't always distinguish between a vividly imagined social experience and the emotions that experience creates. A conversation that never happened can still leave your shoulders tense, your breathing shallow, or your heart unexpectedly heavy. Perhaps you've experienced this after a text that never came, before making a difficult phone call, or while lying awake, rewriting words that can no longer be changed. The conversation was imaginary, the emotions were not, and that's what makes the next question so important. If these inner conversations feel so real, how do we begin to relate to them without letting them quietly become the reality we live inside? Maybe the most important conversations in your life aren't the ones you've had. Maybe they're the ones you've been carrying. Think about that for a moment. How many people are still living inside your mind, even though they've long since left your life? How many conversations are waiting for words that will never be spoken? Perhaps there's someone you still explain yourself to, someone you still defend yourself against, someone whose approval you're still trying to earn, even though they may never know the conversation is still happening. And perhaps that person isn't even someone else. Perhaps it's an older version of you, the child who wanted to be understood, the teenager who wanted to belong, the adult who wishes they had made a different choice. Sometimes our minds replay conversations because the people in them matter. Sometimes they replay them because the version of ourselves inside them still does. Imagine setting down every imaginary conversation for just one day. Not because you've solved them, not because you've forgotten them, simply because, for a moment, you no longer feel responsible for rewriting every possible future. What would the silence sound like? Would it feel empty? Or would it feel unfamiliar? Perhaps that's why these mental rehearsals can be so difficult to notice. They become the background music of our lives, so constant that we mistake them for reality. And maybe that's the quiet invitation hidden inside all of this. Not to stop imagining, not to silence the mind, but to gently recognize the difference between the life you're living and the life your mind is endlessly trying to prepare you for. At the beginning of this journey, we asked a simple question. Why does your mind keep creating conversations that never happen? It might seem like the answer is overthinking, but perhaps the real answer is much more human. Our minds are remarkable prediction machines. They constantly imagine possibilities, rehearse outcomes, and prepare us for moments that matter. Most of the time, that ability helps us solve problems, connect with others, and navigate an uncertain world. But when uncertainty becomes emotional, something changes. The rehearsal quietly becomes a residence. Without noticing, we begin spending more time inside imagined conversations than real ones. We start reacting to futures that haven't arrived, carrying emotions that were born from possibilities instead of experiences. And that's the quiet paradox. The variability that helps us prepare for life can also prevent us from fully living it. Perhaps that's why these imaginary conversations never truly end. Not because your mind is broken, not because you're weak, but because the part of you searching for certainty believes that one more rehearsal might finally make tomorrow safe. Yet tomorrow has never asked for a perfect script. It has only ever asked for your presence. Maybe that's the perspective worth carrying with you. Not that your imaginary conversations are meaningless. They reveal what matters to you. They reveal what you fear. They reveal what you hope. But they are not predictions. They are possibilities. And possibilities are not the same as reality. So the next time you catch yourself halfway through a conversation that exists only in your mind, don't ask, "Why am I doing this again?" Ask a quieter question. What future is my mind trying so hard to protect? And what present moment might it be asking me to miss?